Well, welcome everyone to this week's edition of Inside Harvard Football. Bernie Corbett, as always, kicking off and beginning the program with our time with Tim, head coach Tim Murphy, our guest. And Coach, certainly disappointing, I guess, and maybe somewhat surprising, if not shocking, with the results on Friday. I don't think anybody really saw that type of game coming with two teams that were picked very highly and very well regarded for the Ivy League race this year.
Well, no question about it. We had a tremendous amount of respect for Princeton coming in and left with even more. I did not see this type of game coming. I thought it would be a very hotly contested game that would go down to the final possession the way it did a year ago. But the bottom line is we just never, ever got anything going early in the first quarter, and they had so much momentum after some quick strike drives that just always seemed it was uphill. And then we come back and make it 24-10. We're in the hunt. We got some momentum, and they just go down in a couple plays, and boom, it's 30 at halftime. So, yeah, very different game that we're used to seeing from a Harvard football team. A lot of that, goes to being a great Princeton team. They're as good as offense as we have seen in a long time in this league, and but we obviously have to play better to compete for an Ivy League championship and to get back on the winning track.
The quarterback you faced, Chad Kanoff, you've had some great quarterbacks that have played into the tremendous success of the Crimson program. How do you rate him based on the quarterbacks you've seen during your tenure in the Ivy League? I mean, he's got pro size, he's getting a lot of pro looks, and my goodness, he just couldn't miss for stretches on Friday. He seemed to be on another level.
Well, he certainly played at an extremely high level, and being 6'5", having a strong arm and being a precision passer, it doesn't surprise me that he has pro prospects. He also has a great supporting cast. They do a great job coaching their system. He obviously had some outstanding wideouts and tight ends, and their running game synced up really well. They're a tough team to defend. Just never that tough.
And you mentioned about having opportunities. You get the big play from Dan Warner that set up Booker's touchdown. And then the second half, you have an opportunity there after a stop, and then what turned out to be a crushing early turnover in the second half.
Yeah, no question about it. I thought Jake Smith really hung in there. He's got really outstanding instincts. He's got excellent pocket presence, and he's got really good improvisational skills and the ability to keep the ball alive. And if you look at our two big plays that were close to being touchdowns, I think both ended up about on the 1 foot line. They were on scramble plays, and where he just picked up the receiver and put it where only they could catch it. But the one turnover did hurt us, but he was under intense pressure. We were behind by a lot of points, and the combination thereof realizes at times you're going to throw it up, hopefully not for grabs.
The old Dennis Green line about they were who we thought they were. I guess to a certain extent that applies, Coach, but maybe not to that level. It just seemed to be Princeton's night where they could do almost no wrong. I mean, the law of averages, there's nights like that on both sides.
Well, we had seen it the previous two games, albeit not as against as quality opponent, not as good a quality opponent as we see ourselves, but obviously it was the third consecutive game they put up 50 points, so we know they had a really outstanding offense. We knew they were in sync, and they took it up a level in our game.
It certainly did, and put Princeton in solid position coming down the stretch in Ivy League play. You've had a couple of units that have been particularly banged up and been in a state of disarray for the most part over the course of the year, just because of injuries, etc. What about the look now as you head now to down the stretch of the last 4 games, particularly in the secondary with the situation there and how that's looking right now?
Well, offensively, we don't have any significant injuries, but I think on all 3 levels defensively, we're certainly challenged with some depth issues at the secondary level, at the linebacker level, as we have been all season, and most recently at the defensive line level. So, yeah, there's a lot of new faces playing at all 3 levels, and we've got to get them squared away real fast.
And you look at it, Coach, you recruit guys, and I know you're very high on the class that you brought in, but there's that catch-22 situation you're in where these guys are maybe getting brought along. The baptism of fire is coming a lot earlier than you might have expected back in August before the season started.
No question about it. We'll have some freshmen in our secondary at times. We've got some freshmen playing in the linebacker rotation, and we've even got a freshman or two playing in the defensive line. So yeah, we thought those guys would be playing at the junior varsity level this year, but it is what it is.
And the build-up process this week, Coach, I've been so accustomed to really unprecedented to have a game like that, and it really, going back in your tenure as coach at 20-plus years, was it the type, some coaches say, well, we burn the tape, we throw it away, we don't want anybody to see it, we de-emphasize it. What's that week been like here so far as you're getting geared back up for a big rivalry game on Saturday?
Well, I think the obvious thing, Bernie, is we can't wait to play. You can talk about depth issues, you can talk about this or that. Everybody has those issues at times, and we just got to play, and we have to play better, and we have to coach better. It's not just the players. We're all in this thing together. We have to do a better coaching job. We have to play better, and we've got to do that to maximize our ability to win football games. And certainly, our kids are excited to play. We're excited to get going on this game against another really, really quality opponent.
And a team with Dartmouth that you've got a little bit more insight because that has been a preseason scrimmage partner. Dartmouth was picked, for what it's worth, I prefaced, fifth in the Ivy League. They're 5-1. They've specialized in some fourth quarter comeback wins. They've got an overtime win on their resume, and they came just 6 yards short of staying perfect against a Columbia team that is perfect so far. And what about this Dartmouth team that you're seeing now as opposed to maybe the Dartmouth team that you might have perceived from the fact that you did have a chance to scrimmage them and see them live back in early September?
Well, that's a long time ago, Bernie. They were tough then, I guarantee you. One, they're healthy. Two, they're fifth-year quarterbacks playing at an extremely high level. Three, they're very big and physical on defense, and I think they've kept everybody in a manageable amount of points. They played great defense. And the combination is they're a very gritty, intense team who believes they're going to win if they can get this thing in the fourth quarter. And I think you can make a very solid case that they should have won their sixth consecutive game that would have rendered them undefeated in the driver's seat. They also know that what they've got to do. They're obviously highly motivated because we've certainly had a fair amount of success over Dartmouth over the last 20 years, and all that does is motivate a team.
Mentioned about Jack Hennigan, the fifth-year quarterback, his experience that certainly comes into play in these pressure situations. Fourth quarter game on the line. Lost a receiver, didn't have Drew Honeycutt available last week, but they get Hagdorn, who was the 2016 Ivy Rookie of the Year. So, one in, one out. He's got some threats, he's got some targets, and he has had a pretty good semblance of a running game overall this year.
Yeah, they're a well-balanced team. They also do a good job in their sort of wildcat quarterback as a change-up in short yardage situations, hot zone situations, and they're a team that they're as good as anybody in our league, and obviously they've shown that thus far.
And on the defensive side, overall, Coach, I know you always take a hard look at it. They're +6 in turnovers. They've got a playmaking ability on defense, and they got two outstanding linebackers that are right up among the leaders in the Ivy League with Eric Miley and Jack Traynor. They're very active all over the field, sideline to sideline.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of weaknesses on defense. They never get the ball thrown over the top of them. They average about 290 pounds a piece in their front four. Really big, rugged team. And, they're back to where they were 2 years ago, Bernie.
And lastly, it's tough to talk about Dartmouth without talking about the fact that, I guess to put it in a word, their special teams have been special. Place kicking, punting, coverage, etc. They've got ability to make game-changing plays there also, Coach, with those units.
Well, I think if you're going to be undefeated, which they're one play away from, and maybe one controversial play away from, you got to be good in all phases. And they've done an outstanding job offensively. They've made great adjustments in the second half. They've been a great fourth quarter team. Their defense is right at the top of our league, and so is special teams. So we'll have more of the same coming in this week with another outstanding Ivy League team, and Coach Stevens and his staff have done an outstanding job.
Indeed, the case with your good friend, Coach Buddy Stevens, the Big Green of Dartmouth. There's been some memorable games over the years. You think back to the Friday Night Lights show from 2 years ago, Coach. I can't help but, just as we wrap up, I can't help but think about that game because of the atmosphere and just the whole experience. That was one of the games that I think you got to kind of put into the time capsule of your time at Harvard as a really special night where two really outstanding teams went at each other for 60.
No question about it. It's not going to help me to think of that one now, but maybe someday, long after my career as a coach is over, you'll be able to point to that as really one of the great games in Harvard football history.
Indeed, the case. Looking for more of that to write some history this week, and I know that you and the Crimson anxious to, as you said, bounce back and get on the field and let's play again. And Coach, want to wish you the best this week and look forward to time with Tim next week.
Thanks very much, Bernie.
Coach Tim Murphy, our time with Tim this week as the Crimson get ready for the Big Green of Dartmouth. We'll be back. This week's Crimson in the NFL is all about Tampa Bay Buccaneers tight end Cam Brate. Cam hauled in 6 of 9 targets for 60 yards against the Bills on Sunday. He has 6 receptions in back-to-back games and has seen at least 6 targets for 4 consecutive games. Currently, Cam has 27 receptions through 6 contests in 2017. And that has been this week's Crimson in the NFL here on Inside Harvard Football. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's edition of Inside Harvard Football. Bernie Corbett pleased to be joined in our Beyond the Stadium alumni segment this week by a recent alum, although he just reminded me, man, it's been almost coming up on 5 years. Yep, he was the captain of the 2013 Harvard Ivy League Championship Club for Tim Murphy, Josh Boyd of Hyde Park, Catholic Memorial, local boy that made good for the Crimson, and certainly still making good today as we catch up with him. He was the 140th captain of the Crimson back in 2013. Remember, that is a very special season. And Josh, I want to welcome you to the program, and great to have some time to catch up with you this week.
No, absolutely, Bernie. I appreciate you having me on, and that was quite the introduction, and I thoroughly appreciate those words, and again, excited to be on with you.
You had an outstanding career that you had at Harvard, and part of some great success, 2011 championship team, 2013, your senior year as captain. But we like to get the backstory, and in the case of Josh Boyd, you were local and had some knowledge of the Crimson. I always enjoy talking to some of the guys that come from far and wide, and I remember talking to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I did the book on the Harvard-Yale rivalry back in 2002, and he reacted by saying, well, when I started getting letters from Harvard, I didn't even know they had a football program. You were a little different being local. You knew there was a football program over in Cambridge. And how did it come about as far as your recruiting and your opportunity to come to Harvard?
No, absolutely. Definitely was familiar with the program. Definitely understood the level of excellence and the standard that they had in Cambridge. And I suppose it was going into my junior year, I started receiving letters from Coach Murphy and from Harvard with interest in me as a prospective student athlete. I just continued to plug away, try to keep my grades up and perform on the football field. I had the privilege to go to a couple of camps, the Harvard football camp, and then a few other local camps, Boston College and the New England Elite Camp, if I recall correctly, where there were coaches from Harvard present at those. So I was able to establish a nice relationship with multiple coaches throughout the recruiting process. And the more I progressed, as a football player and keeping up my grades in school, it just seemed like a likely fit and a nice match. And unfortunately, it all came together. The culmination of my senior football season was able to sort of put the pen to paper and make it official. But all throughout the whole process, I had a great rapport with all the coaches, particularly Coach Lamb, who was my recruiting coach, and Coach Murphy. And the more I was around the coaches and the players and got to understand what Harvard football was all about, it seemed like a great fit in my mind. And certainly his decision. I haven't regret it one day.
You know, I think in doing my research, I believe it was your uncle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a family member that put it in, I thought, a great perspective about your experience and about what the student athlete experience is for somebody in the Ivy League, particularly someone at Harvard. I believe he said to your mom and dad, you know, people go looking for Harvard. When Harvard comes looking for you, no matter what the reason, you better take notice about that. And I think that was very sound advice, and that kind of brings everything into perspective.
No, absolutely. You're certainly, taken aback a bit when you see the letter.
Yeah.
You double check the posting on it to make sure it was sent to the right place. But no, it's certainly humbling, and you certainly are honored when that is the case when Harvard comes looking for you. But I guess it's certainly a natural reminder to let you know that you're doing the right things and you're on the right track. And again, fortunately, it all came together, and definitely have fond memories taken aback during that whole process when the recruitment was going on and how it all came together.
And truth be told, Josh, you really weren't active in team sports until high school, and then you made up for it, more than made up for it, with 12 varsity letters at Catholic Memorial football, outstanding in wrestling. People might not know you had 100 career wins in wrestling, 100 matches. You were victorious, Division II state champion, all the way to the state championship. Also excelled in track. You're two-time All-Catholic Conference in football. But I guess the reputation, you're kind of a shy kid growing up, and you really kind of came to it a little bit later on, and then all of a sudden you really got very comfortable to the point of being excelling and being as outstanding as you were to get the opportunity to come to Harvard.
No, absolutely. I think you painted the picture quite accurately there. I was very much shy, introvert, growing up, and I was a bit on the husky side that unfortunately prevented me from being able to participate in football growing up because I was always a bit heavier than what my age group was. So rather than, them allowing me to play up, with kids, 3 or 4 years older than me, I sort of had to be on the sidelines for much of my childhood. But once I came to Catholic Memorial, which was in the 8th grade, I was able to get my first time, first experience playing football in the middle school program there. Definitely was a learning experience, playing, organized football for the first time and contact and whatnot. But once I got through to the high school level and got introduced to the weight room and I got my footing freshman football and wrestling, I sort of just took everything I learned from those initial years and try to dedicate myself to the bigger, faster, stronger weightlifting program that they had at CM. Just try to learn from my coaches as best I can. Sort of, trying to follow in the footsteps of my older brother, who was a Catholic Memorial graduate, class of 2004, and just try to set my own standard and kind of break out of his shadow. He was an exceptional student athlete there as well. Fortunately, I had great coaches, great mentors, great teammates and classmates at CM that pushed me and wanted. It motivated me to want to go to the next level and get the most out of my time there.
And showed a lot of self-discipline. You talked about how you really had to reshape yourself as an individual. You made some decisions that exhibited a lot of self-discipline. They talked about you had to say goodbye to some friends like, Mr. Dunkin' Donut and Mr. McDonald's along the way.
No, absolutely. It was, it was definitely had to, like you said, dedicate myself. And I remember I had McDonald's quite a bit growing up. And I knew once, I had to make the decision, that I wanted to be, a certain type of, presence on the football and the wrestling programs. You definitely have to cut certain things out. And there's definitely a small sacrifice that, I think, fortunately paid off for me. But definitely had to, retool and restructure how I went about things in order to get the most out of myself and my experiences there.
Certainly paid off. You came to Harvard and had an opportunity to see action early on, but a career that did not lack adversity, because I can remember you suffered a a very tough injury when you had your leg injury, broke your leg, and had, I'm sure, some soul searching and a long rehab process that I'm sure gave you time for reflection to get yourself back and to finish your career as you did as one of the top tacklers going back in the whole Tim Murphy era.
No, absolutely. Freshman year was definitely some tough times. I hesitate to say dark times because ultimately it ended up giving me an extra year of eligibility and it allowed me to learn a lot about myself. Going through that adversity. So I hesitate to say the toughest of times, but definitely in the moment going through it. Being injured for the first time in my athletic career, a significant injury that was going to knock me out for the entire season. Coupling that with the transition to college academics and at a place like Harvard, no less. Trying to get adjusted to that workload. Figure out my place on the team and whatnot. Definitely a lot of reflection during those times. But ultimately, I think it made me stronger. I learned from it. I leaned on my family, my teammates, my coaches, to get me through and keep me upbeat throughout the entire process. And, all throughout, everyone just told me, hey, this is just a small setback for a great comeback. My uncle always said that to me. And those words certainly rang true because I was motivated all throughout, the fall when I was rehabbing. And my main motivation was to get back that coming spring and get on the field and show folks what I was about. I was fortunately able to do that. And then from there, I just try to, keep building, each step of the way to ultimately get to where I want to be.
Well, I like that small setback for a big comeback. Also, what we talked about earlier, Harvard coming looking for you, you go looking for Harvard. Could you introduce me to your uncle? I think he's a man that is an eloquent man that has some great moments of clairvoyance and wisdom.
Oh, he is. He's very positive, very loquacious.
Yep.
Always there to give you, the pep talk and the pat on the back. He's one of the best.
Indeed. Special time for you that culminated with the captaincy your senior year and a 9-1 team, 6-1 in the Ivy League. Road Warriors that year. The only loss was one of the wildest games I've called in almost 20 years that I've been at the mic for Harvard football was the 51-48 marathon against Princeton. But that was the only blemish on an otherwise perfect season. As you think back on that year, Josh, now 4 years removed, what immediately comes to mind? Is there any particular moment or any particular incident that happened, event during the course of that season that when you think of your career and you think of that senior year as the captain that immediately kind of pops into your head?
There's certainly a few moments that come to mind, Bernie. What you first mentioned there, resiliency is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that team and that season.
Yep.
Because despite only having the one blemish there, it certainly wasn't pretty most of those weeks. We had to, gut it out and pull out some tough victories.
Yep.
The Princeton game that you mentioned there, and that wasn't even our first triple overtime game that season. We had one down in Worcester against Holy Cross, a place that traditionally, at least during my time there, we struggled. I know the previous two trips that we made there, we didn't come out with a victory. So that's always their homecoming game, and they're always hyped up to play us. So I feel like that initial triple overtime victory game, the one we were able to pull out in Holy Cross, that's certainly one that sticks out because we didn't necessarily play our best that day, but the defense got a lot of turnovers earlier. The offense bailed us out there at the end of regulation to push the game into overtime. So I think the way we came together to get a tough road win, a tough in-state win in a place that we traditionally haven't played well, I think that certainly was a big mark in the season. And then bouncing back from the sole blemish we had there against Princeton, I think that showed a lot of the resolve and the makeup of the guys we had on the team, particularly the seniors. We had 30 plus. I think we had 36 seniors that season, which was one of the bigger classes I think Coach Murphy has had in his time there. And I think just the way we dug deep and bounced back from that loss, as tough as it was, we knew that's not the way that we wanted to go out. And the whole season, we always preach wanting to play our best football down the stretch. And I think the resounding victory we had in New Haven to end the season certainly, held true to what our goals were. And that was to play our best football in game number 10. And fortunately, we were able to come out with a share of the title. And I guess that's a final memory I'll mention from that season is us finding out the result of the Princeton game. Dartmouth pulled it out for us in the snow.
Mm-hmm.
The bus is pulling over in New Haven on our way back to Cambridge, and the whole team just getting out and celebrating on the sidewalk, and just elated at the news that all the hard work that we put in over that whole off season came together for us. So definitely a lot of fond memories from that team. Just the resiliency and the makeup of that bunch. You certainly don't forget it, and went through a lot of tough games and tough times that season, but and it ended with a championship.
Oh, indeed it did. And I can remember there was that odd moment about the game in the snow up at Dartmouth, and I can remember Mike Giardi and we were following the game, and Mike very close with Coach Lamb, texting back and forth to get the final result. We didn't pull over; we kept going. I think we were looking forward to a beverage at the other end of the ride. But Mike and I celebrated also. We were pretty happy about that, and that was a great finish to the season. Coach Murphy talks about blue collar mentality of a team. When you hear that and you think about your background, being a Boston kid, going to Harvard, what is that? What comes to mind when you hear that term from Coach Murphy about what that term means to you and what it's meant to the success of this program, the remarkable, unprecedented success of this program?
It certainly means a lot, Bernie. The mentality of rolling up your sleeves and getting the job done, no matter how dirty. It certainly rings true, not only on the football field in that sense, but as we would say when we were playing, on the other side of the bridge, so like in the real world, so to speak, in real life situations. It's a great mentality to have, and the mental toughness there is certainly something that Coach Murphy always preached to us, and overcoming any adversity that comes your way, because it's inevitable. No matter where you are in life, at some point you're going to meet some, and having that workman-like blue-collar mentality is really essential to get through any issues that come your way. So whether it's the tough workouts, the tough practices, being down in a game, having to study for a big exam, a big job interview coming up, just having that workman-like mentality that that you're going to get the job done and you're going to put in the necessary work to get to the goals that you set up for yourself. Again, Coach Murphy does a great job of instilling that mentality in us, and seeking out guys who he feels has that mentality and that character. It's definitely a big staple of the program, and the type of guys that we bring in, and Coach Murphy brings in to the program. And even growing up, my father, being a labor foreman and construction worker, doing the early mornings and the late nights, whatnot. So just growing up, seeing all the work he would put in, and my mother working tirelessly, going through school with two kids, and her pushing it to the max every day. So growing up in a blue collar middle class, lifestyle, it's what I know, and I think that's why Harvard football felt like home to me throughout the whole process. When I was deciding where to go to school, just meeting the guys and hearing their perspective on things. Again, it's certainly a hallmark of the program, and I think it's great that Coach seeks that out in guys and continues to instill that in guys for football and then for post-football to have that mentality.
Well, it was a perfect fit, and with your play on the field, Josh, certainly a perfect storm, if you will. You finished your career with over 200 tackles. You put up some remarkable numbers, as productive as you were at your linebacker position. And sports was, I guess you had a number of options and multitude of different internships during your time at Harvard, but you find yourself working and employed at the worldwide leader. What about Josh Boyd today? I'm sure everybody wants to know what you're involved with at ESPN.
Well, certainly not tackling folks anymore, as much as I would like to sometimes. But no, gainfully employed by ESPN. I've been a cast member, I should say, since we're part of Disney. I've been with the company since April of 2014, working in the remote production operations department as a crewing coordinator. So essentially responsible for hiring and staffing our college football remote events all across our network. So I had the pleasure to work with a lot of great crews, producers, directors, and be on hand for a lot of the network's biggest college football events, namely this past college football championship in Tampa earlier this January. So being the nuts and bolts of the whole operation, the setup and knockdown of a college football show, week to week. It's been a great experience. You get to work with a lot of different people, see the behind the scenes for getting shows on air, and I've met a lot of great people along the way. So I'm certainly thankful for the opportunity to be a great company and be co-workers with some former teammates. Because Trevor Scales, who was our running back,
right?
Class of 2013.
Yep.
He's a member, cast member, and ESPN employee as well. So it's been phenomenal to sort of have that teammate from football be a teammate in the real world now.
And still, and of course, we remember everybody in Crimson Football Nation when Game Day visited in 2014 for the Yale game. I can't believe it's almost 3 years ago, but what a great experience that was. It was so much fun.
Absolutely, and then that's my department is essential in putting College Game Day together, and deciding the locations where they go. And we were ecstatic, Trevor and I, when we found out that Game Day chose to go to Harvard Yale that year, and that was actually my first. Because again, that was the 2014 season, so I was just getting started at ESPN, and it was really cool to be on hand as a first-time alum for the Harvard Yale game, and as a ESPN employee, seeing College Game Day up close and just sort of being there to see all that come together was an unbelievable experience.
That was great experience for everybody. I'll long remember it. And the final question I got to ask once again, from researching a little bit of your backstory way back, you were a published poet at a very early age. I mean, I would envision you maybe as the poet laureate of Harvard football. Is poetry something that you pursued at all? Do you do some writing in a creative form such as that in the intervening years?
I don't write as much as I used to, Bernie. Definitely growing up, particularly like in elementary school, I had some pretty profound and instrumental literature and English teachers growing up, and they sort of brought out the writer in me, I suppose. Pretty much taking my feelings and the experiences I had with my upbringing, just putting pen to paper and creating stories, writing poetry, whatever the case was. I just had a penchant for express myself that way. My uncle, growing up, he would tell me to keep a journal of things, and how therapeutic it was to get your thoughts out and express yourself that way. I had some great teachers along the way, and again, it definitely allowed the venue and outlet for me to express myself. And I'm still definitely an inward thinker, a deep thinker today. I don't necessarily write as much, but I definitely reflect fondly on the times where I was crafting stories and creating poetry, and that was a pretty cool thing to get published there.
Yes,
I was in 8th grade at the time.
Yeah,
and that was a pretty cool experience to purchase that book and see a work of mine in there.
Tremendous. It was great to have an opportunity to spend the time and reminisce a bit, and hopefully that was as therapeutic as your journal, spending time with me here this week on Inside Harvard Football, Josh. We really appreciate it.
No, absolutely, Bernie. I greatly appreciate you having me on. I'm always happy to reflect on my time at Harvard. Tremendous honor to be a part of that program. I have a great sense of pride in being a Crimson, and I appreciate you having me on. I'm always happy to share my thoughts and my perspective on things related to Harvard.
Josh Boyd taking us beyond the stadium as our alumni profile this week, the captain of the 2013 Ivy League champions here on Inside Harvard Football.